Okay, so I think we're set and the screen is shared. So far, my voice has been good enough to continue, right? I shouldn't change my place?
That's totally audible and clear. No worries here.
Okay, okay, perfect. So with that being said, we're gonna get started, okay? I hope everybody is ready. For today's class, I'm going to be walking through or together exploring and navigating the universality of fasting. Because normally, when we think of fasting, we sort of think that Islam is the only religion that sort of takes fasting really seriously. We sort of tend to indirectly and subconsciously exclude the other's experience with fasting. Okay, so we'll be looking at the Quranic perspective, the Hadith perspective, the sayings of the Prophet, and then some of the luminaries and thinkers across Islam. And then we go to Christianity and look at what the Bible says, then some of their thinkers, what they have formulated the experience of fasting. Then we'll look into Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and the Native Americans, interestingly, as well as the Canaanites and ancient Egyptians. And there are mind-boggling convergence, right? They're going to intersect in the phenomenon of fasting. So fasting could be a bridge between all of these religions, and even the religions that have gone extinct. So it will be a very interesting ride, I would assume, and hopefully by the end of the lesson, you will have gained a newer and fresher perspective on the essentiality and universality of fasting. Okay, so far so good. Shall we get into it?
So far, so good, Mr. Ahmed.
Okay, perfect. So let's see if there's anybody whom I forgot to send a link to. I think there doesn't seem to be anybody. Okay, and please, everybody, feel free to ask your questions, maybe write it in the chats. But at the end of the lesson, we're going to have a Q&A, question and answer, whereby I want you to also participate as well. Okay. So with that being said, let's get right into it, and I want your full attention. So let's see if there's a recording. Yeah, recorded. All right. So as you know, the title. Sorry. Uh, Let me go back. All right. Fasting as universal divine legislation. All right. The spiritual architecture of fasting within Islam will examine the intellectual and spiritual dimension of fasting through the lenses of the Quran, prophetic tradition, and Islamic theology, kalam, and mysticism, tasawwuf. Okay, let's get right into the first aspect. So we'll first look into the etymology, that is the root of the word. That is very important in order to navigate any intellectual or any aspect of human knowledge with etymology. Etymology contains lots of knowledge and wisdom. So starting from the Arabic term "saum," which literally means to abstain or to refrain from something. Okay, so basically, fasting is an act of abstinence. Okay, if you think about fasting, it is an experience of non-doing as much as it is a doing. Okay, in fasting, we are involved in abstaining. We're involved in non-action. If you look at the other pillars of Islam, we know that they involve some sort of action, right? In prayer, we're moving our limbs. In Hajj, we have to go to a particular location, and the same is true for giving to charity. But fasting, it is, abstaining. You're refraining. You're stopping. Sort of, you're not doing anything in a sense of physical action as much as you're refraining, right? So it is a state of non-action. Okay, who is also entering? Okay. And Ramadan, interestingly, derives from Ramad, which means scorching heat. Okay, just remember what does scorching heat do to the minerals, right? To the raw minerals in nature. You can get the core of a gold through having it go through a scorching heat, isn't it? And if you think about the analogy across Ramadan, the month of the revelation of the Quran, the month of, the months of many important things, we can see that it could work as a sweltering, very hot experience that we can go through and be purified and refined, and all the negative, low base aspect of us be separated from us, at least for this month, right? So it is a month symbolizing a very degree of high temperature. And I just want to look at the analogy Ibn Arabi, one of the greatest, or the Sheikh al-Islam, like the Sheikh of Islam, that he said something of the following regarding fire and fasting. Okay, so he says, when the gates of the fire are locked, so imagine there's fire. Okay, there's fire in a room, and where the gates are locked, the fire, instead of going away, is gonna turn back on itself, and heat is multiplied on it, and it consumes itself. So he says, likewise, the person fasting is like that with his nature. When we fast, the gates of the fire of our nature, of our nafs, are shut. Nafs al-amara bisu, it has, encourage you say, nafs bigri mishteka, baridi dashteka. When we close the door on it in Ramadan and while fasting, and Ramadan meaning scorching heat, imagine the fire is going to turn on itself, is going to consume and burn itself. Okay? And it's very interesting because, just speaking of the Epstein scandal, I mean, what it tells us basically is a lack of self-restraint. It tells us the Western civilization has lost this mechanism, this dynamic of self-abstinence, of self-restraint, of self-control. Okay, which we're going to get into, which is the etymological root of taqwa itself. Okay, just imagine how many marriages are spared and saved because of self-restraint, isn't it? How many people's lives are spared and saved when there's a self-restraint, there's a restraining, there's this inner jihad, right? The Quranic perspective. Okay, so let's look at these two gems of verses. The first verse says, "O you have believed, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may attain taqwa." So it says fasting is like a conditioned place. It is an experience whereby it enables you. It doesn't deterministically tell you when you fast you're going to get taqwa. It says so that you may attain taqwa. Okay, so and then we're going to get into the etymology of taqwa. But before that, it is prescribed, it is written on us, on all the previous nations. We normally think of, okay, previous nations could mean the Abrahamic religions, right? Judaism and Christianity. But interestingly, the classical scholars have said that all the nations coming from Adam, you know, have been observing and adhering to this phenomenon of fasting. Okay, so it goes way back into history, and I would say it goes way back before Adam on the world, right? So in Christianity, before Prophet Muhammad came, there's this scholar in Christianity who said that fasting was in heaven itself, started from heaven, right? God says, "Don't get close to the tree of not of good and of the knowledge of good and evil." From the biblical tradition, there the tree symbolizes knowledge of good and evil. But then they couldn't adhere to the fast, and they broke the fast and they ate from it. And then that's why we're fasting here, right? If they didn't eat from the tree, we would not have been fasting. Okay, so this is the first. We're going to get into taqwa. And then the second verse says the month of Ramadan is that in which the Quran was revealed. So it's a month related to the revelation of the Quran, a guidance for humanity. So the Quran is a guidance for humanity, but it's not a guidance for everybody. The Quran says, "La rayba fihi hudan lil muttaqin." This book, the Quran, there is no doubt in it, and it is a guidance to those who have taqwa. Again, if you want Quran to work through you, then you need to work on your taqwa. Otherwise, the Quran is not going to work through us. We can read it multiple times, and we're going to still be people of sin, people of transgression, people of dhulm, right? And Quran has clear proofs, and it's a guidance and the criterion. Furqan, does anybody know the meaning of Furqan? Sorry, Furqan, does anybody know? Do you know what is Furqan? Any guess? Furqan, Mr. Barra? It means Quran. One of the names of Quran is Furqan. Okay, but Furqan itself means the differentiator of good and evil, of truth and falsehood, of ugliness and beauty. Okay, Furqan is a criterion, a standard. If we don't have it, we're going to be confused and lost. Just as like many people we're nowadays witnessing that we're not following the Quran and we seem to be lost because the Quran is the guide, is the standard. Okay, so that is Furqan. Okay, so far the voice is going clear.
Audible, sir. No worries.
No interruptions, like from here and then.
No, no. Sometimes the image get blurry, but that's
Uh,
fine. It gets better.
yeah, hopefully. Okay, so all right, now let's continue. So please focus on the words. Even my image is getting blurry. So focus on the message. So before we go to the prophetic hadith, I want to look at the root of taqwa. The root of taqwa in Arabic, the etymology, means to shield, to protect, to refrain. So I was thinking about it, like what should we protect? What should we be protecting from? So taqwa means, or muttaqi is a person who's protecting. Protecting what? I would assume it's protecting our fitra from the nafs, from Satan. Okay, so we have this fitra that God says, I have created human beings on the fitra, fitratullah. Okay, so fatarallah as a verb is used. So basically, taqwa is it's just to protect what is already there. It's not creating some new personality, just like the modern world is telling us, become somebody. In Ramadan, we're actually not becoming somebody new, like being more successful, having more reputation. No, it is about preserving taqwa, protecting, shielding, like a shield in war, shielding what is already there. That is the fitrah. Okay? So that is a very interesting realization that we all have to carry throughout Ramadan. We have to let the fitrah shine God's attributes. We're going to get to that later. Okay, let's. The reason that I'm not having you to read the paragraphs is because there are going to be many slides that, had I not covered it myself, it would be very time consuming. So the prophetic hadith. Let's see what the prophet has said about it, right? I'm sure you have heard of the different sayings of the prophet, but let's see if there's anything new and if there's any link that we can make. So first, Prophet Muhammad says, Allah said, every deed of the son of Adam is for him, except fasting. It is for me, and I shall reward for it. Okay? And different scholars have understood it differently. Some say that other rituals and worship forms are sometimes other people can see it, right? When you're praying, other people can see it. When you're in Hajj, other people can see it. When you're sort of sharing, charitable, the person who receives it sort of sees it. But fasting, nobody knows. It's only between you and God, unless you say it yourself, right? And Ibn Arabi has a different understanding, right? It says fasting is not doing, it is non-doing, as we said in the beginning. And it looks like God because God, laysa kamithlihi shay. Okay, there's nothing, nobody that looks like God. So transcends every category that we have, right? Whatever our heart and mind says about God, like you say, this is God, we're actually wrong. We cannot conceptualize God. We can at best try to get close to his names and divine attributes. And another hadith says fasting is a shield. And again, taqwa also means to shield, to protect yourself, like the shield here in the picture. And I would think about it as fasting as a shield from your nafs al-amara bis-su. Because Imam Ghazali says, when you're fasting, all your temptations are going to be weakened. Imagine shaitan is going through the arteries and veins in our body of the soul, let's say, the artery and vein of the soul. When we're fasting, it is going to be constricted, it's going to be restricted. And then the pathway of Satan is going to be limited. Fasting is the only practice that's going to weaken all of our fundamental desires that can go wrong. Okay. And then another hadith says, whoever does not give up false speech and acting upon it, Allah has no need of his giving up his food and drink. So it is not only a physical fasting and abstinence, it should be, the goal should be a spiritual refraining from anything that's useless, right? It could be speech, it could be looking at the impermissible, hearing the impermissible. We're going to try our best not to get to this realm, right? And then Another interesting one says, patient is half of faith. And I need you to make some calculations now, okay? Patience is half of faith, and fasting is half of patience. Tell me now who's good in mathematics. When you make into 100 percentage, what is the relationship between fasting and faith? How much of faith, okay, uh, can fasting increase? Patience is half of faith, okay, and fasting is half of patience. What is the relationship between fasting and faith in terms of 100 percentage? Anybody? Any mathematical genius? Patience is 50% of faith, and fasting is 50% of patience. What is the numerical relationship between fasting and faith? You got the question? Everyone? Did you hear me?
Yeah, that's audible, Mr. Ahmed. Actually, I got the question, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not very good at math.
Okay, so it's going to be a quarter, right? 25%. Imagine patience is half of faith, okay? Patience is 50% of faith. And fasting is half of patience, okay?
Okay.
Let's say 50% of patience in total is going to be 25% of faith. So fasting is a
Yes,
quarter of having faith in God. Okay, so it's really interesting, and the fasting
important.
experience is an alternation, a shift from patience into gratitude. Okay, patience and shukr. So during the time of fasting, we're all assuming fasting, and we're in a state of patience, right? Patience or patient, otherwise we break it, right? And then once we're going to break the fast, we're going to be in a state of a shukr, right? A gratitude. Okay, let's continue. Let's get into what Imam Ghazali, Hujjat al-Islam, the proof of Islam, has said about fasting. He said fasting has 3 degrees, okay? So fasting has three levels. The fast of the general public, like the fast of my fast, okay? And then there's the fast of the elect. Hopefully, I'm in the elect. We don't know. We try to our best to go to the third level. Psalm al-Khusus, okay, of the elect. And then there's the fasting of the elite of the elite. Psalm al-Khusus al-Khusus, yani the most special fasting. So what are these levels? Imam Ghazali in Ihya Ulumuddin, the reconstruction of the religious sciences, which is one of the magnum opus, most revolutionary, transformative books ever, written around 1,000 years ago. So there he talks about in detail. He says the fasting of the people, general people, is only the fasting of the physical aspects, right? They may sometimes swear, they may sometimes look at the impermissible, listen to the impermissible. And he said this is general fasting, but he doesn't reject it. He said this is one level. And he says after that, there's a higher level that is the level of those people who fast the eye. So the eye is going to be in a state of fasting, and the mouth and tongue. And so it's a higher sense of fasting. And then the third one, he says, the fasting of the prophets and the siddiqun. That is a kind of fasting where anything other than God, ma siwa, other than God, is not going to be thought about. So you're not going to think about reputation. You're not going to think about making money. You're not going to think about anything other than God. That is the highest level of fasting. Okay. And then he says spiritual receptivity and beholding the kingdom of God. So have you noticed that fasting is a kind of emptying? Like we're emptying ourselves. We're not filling as much. We're not doing things. We're just emptying from, I don't know, from the seven deadly sins, right? From gluttony, from lust, from aggression, from greed and jealousy and pride, right? And laziness. These are the seven deadly sins. So we're just emptying ourselves from these deadly, fatal sins, okay? And when we're emptied of them, then what's going to appear is the fitra. And then God can come to the fitra through his attributes and names. And then you're going to be the person who whom God is working behind. You're going to be the person whom God is working behind. Okay, and that is the etymology of the word Khalifa, right? Isn't it? Doesn't the Quran say we're sent to the world as a Khalifa? Khalifa, the Arabic word means Khalif, like means the person whom God is working behind. And God is never going to work behind you or work through you if you're not emptying yourself, of your nafs. Okay? In English, there's a pejorative negative term that we're using. That is, if I tell you, Mr. Barra, you're full of yourself, you should be offended, right? Being full of yourself is not something very good. Full of yourself. Okay? Softening of the heart and making it receptive, meeting the Lord as a result. And imagine just being in the presence of God, because taqwa, one of the meanings of taqwa is also God wariness, being aware of God, being aware of God's presence. And isn't fasting helping us kind of the most of being aware of God's presence? Okay. So this is Imam Ghazali's take. Then we go to Ibn Arabi, as I said, one of the most profound thinkers that the earth has ever seen. Okay, and he says emptiness as the door to God, and fasting is a means to enable us emptiness. Okay, fasting as a negative attribute. Okay, so this idea of fasting as a negative attribute is inspired by the hadith that Prophet Muhammad says, "Take upon yourself the fast, for it has no likeness." Prophet Muhammad said, "It has no likeness." Isn't God the same person who said, "There's laysa kamithli shay"? There's nobody who looks like God. Okay, there's no likeness of God, and fasting is the closest thing ever to God. Okay, through the time of fasting, we participate in al-samad, okay, in the creaturely mode. We become a mazhar. This is why God says, "It is for me for self-disclosure." So there's this idea of Ibn Arabi trying to take the legal sayings of the Prophet and the sayings of the other scholars and turn a metaphysical twist to it. Okay, so his idea is al-mazhar, right? Mazhar means the loci of God's manifestation. It's like if I get a mirror, and I look at the mirror can, I can reflect in the mirror. Okay, and all of us, we are different mirrors, given different degrees and capacities, but nonetheless, we're mirrors by the fact of being given the fitrah, and we can reflect God's names. And in fasting, what kind of God's name can we reflect? One of God's names is the independent. Okay, so when we're fasting, we sort of become stronger, isn't it? We don't become as much dependent of the worldly things, right? We can, in a sense, God is going to visit our fitra through his name Al-Samad, the independent, and then we feel this independent of the material world, that this is actually God's name reflecting in us. You see? But Ibn Arabi says not only the time of fasting is very crucial, he says the breaking is very important for us too. Because when we break the fast, it is then that we realize we are really, really dependent, isn't it? Okay? So we feel God's ghina. Ghani means very rich. So we know that we're really weak, frail, impotent, poor, and the only rich entity there is God. And when we're eating, we're just basically saying that we're really weak. We really depend on you, God, for our physiology, for our body, for everything. So we feel God's in the moment of breaking the fast, we feel God's ghani, richness, and our weakness. Okay, but where we're fasting, we feel sort of God's name of transcendence, right? We sort of transcend the material things through God's name, not from ourselves, right? We do nothing good. Every good is coming from God. So far, so good. Are we following?
Yeah, it is a good fear for me.
Is my video sort of interrupting my voice? Shall I close it, or is it fine?
Mm, it is good. I don't know. There is no problem with it.
There is no problem so far. Okay. Shall I continue?
Carry on, Mr. Ahmed.
That one. Just
Oh,
can I mention something about that one?
definitely. Definitely, Ms. Hafida.
In Turkey, actually, we talk about the hiçlik makamı,
Mm-hmm.
which means is the state of nothingness. It
Mm-hmm.
means to be clear from all worldly pleasures and desires, etc. So we believe that the first step is the fasting, which makes you to feel that nothingness. Actually, you know, when you feel put a lot of worldly pleasure in yourself, on your soul, so you're going to be full, but worldly full. So we try to be nothing in this world. So the first step is like emptying everything about your soul,
Mm-hmm.
about the world desire. So this emptiness we mention actually nothingness in our version too. So it's very similar to each other. I just want to mention
Yes.
that one.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That is a striking similarity, as you said, hiçlik makamı, the state of nothingness or emptiness. And I think that's true in a day-to-day interaction. I mean, if we really feel nothing of ourselves, like the temptations, right? We feel them they're not real because God is only real. And then just imagine how much positive force is going to bring to the world. All the destructions, all the death, or the sexual transgressions that's happening within the world. Imagine if fear of God is there. Only fear of God. You know, Prophet Muhammad said, every religion has virtues, and the virtue of Islam is modesty, haya. And what is haya but self-restraint, isn't it? So self-restraint is really a beautifying aspect. Whoever has it, that person has got beauty and goodness and truth within them. And Ibn Arabi, furthermore, the last point is he's using the word why death? So he says the way of the salikun, the seekers of truth of God, they have to go through for death in order to empty themselves, as Ms. Javida talked about, this self-emptying. And he talks about the black death. That is when you tolerate and endure people's offenses and the way they hurt you, right? So he says if you can actually go through this and have hilm, you're patient on people's giving you headaches and nuisances, then he says you're going towards illumination. Look at Prophet Muhammad. He would be praying, and people would throw the intestines and internals of animals, and he would endure it. And that is very difficult because the ego, wants to fight back and take revenge, right? So Ibn Arabi talks about the black death, that is enduring people's offenses. I don't know how many of you are interested into existentialist philosophy, but there's this guy who is probably one of the founders of existential philosophy, whose name is Jean-Paul Sartre from France. Okay, around 100 years ago, he said something interesting that he said, hell is other people, right? He didn't believe in God, obviously. So, of course, when you don't believe in God, you cannot just endure people's sufferings, right? When they give you headaches, just like the prophets did, right? And I would say in Islam, heaven is other people. We have to endure other people's sort of offenses silently, and we should not get into the retaliatory mode of going over justice. We have to at least, of course, be just, and there's this reciprocity. Somebody hurts you, an eye for an eye, right? But this eye for an eye is something present in the Quran, by the way. But there's a higher state that is called, if they take the eye out, you can have the way of justice, but you can have the way of ihsan, which is forgiveness. Okay, that's a white death is similar to white and illumination. So if you can, fasting for him is a white death. If you can fast continuously, the fasting of the Imam Ghazali said, right, the third level of fasting. This fasting can actually let the light come across you. Okay, this is Ibn Arabi. And let's move on to Sayyid Nursi, one of my all-time favorite Islamic scholar and my childhood role model. So interestingly, he was not a singer. My childhood role model was him, and he says fasting is related to humanity's collective life. So there's this collective life of fasting where all sort of together are in this game. That's why we don't feel as much difficult, isn't it? Because everybody's in it. It's collective. Unlike Christianity, especially lately, Christianity has made it optional, right? The moment it becomes optional, that's the moment you're going to lose it. So Ramad, right, scorching heat, is a training ground, Badiou says in his writing about fasting, for touching servitude and shattering the illusion of lordship. He says, normally when you go about life, we sort of have this lordship mentality, right? This pharaohanic means comes from the pharaoh mentality. And while we're fasting, this illusion of being a pharaoh is going to be destroyed and shattered by the pain and burning effect of fasting. And we touch our servitude because, like, we're a servant, we're a slave of God, and He's going to determine when we're going to start a fasting, when we're going to break it. Another understanding of it is we're a servant because we are dependent on God, isn't it? Like, I'm speaking, everything about me is dependent on God. So let's be honest, we're actually slaves of God. So people take it as like they get offended. Oh, how can we be slaves? Like, I'm important. This individualism is something Western. And this is not something bad, because when you're a servant of God, when you touch servitude, then God is going to work through you. Don't you want God working through you? Aren't you going to be the king of the kings if you have this experience? When God says, be a slave, says the nefesh should go away and let me go through you. Then you're going to be king. That's actually our servitude is the highest form of freedom. So again, he says, Quran as if it were being revealed for the first time. He says, read the Quran as if it is revealed to you right now. Listen to it as if Jibreel is speaking to Prophet Muhammad. So don't feel yourself distant from the Quran. And he says, fasting Ramadan refines the person's heart, spirit, reason, and innermost senses, even if the stomach, distracting factory, complains. These senses rejoice and are happy. So Badiou Samasa University says the stomach is a factory. Okay? And he says the most distracting factory, the more you fill it, that is gluttony, one of the 7 deadly sins, gluttony, the more is going to distract other organs, other senses and faculties. Okay? So he said a lot more about how the nature of human being is frail, weak, impoverished. And in fasting, we're going to touch this aspect of ourselves. We're going to get to know ourselves truly. And then we're going to get strength from God's different names and attributes. Okay, then let's get into Christianity. In Christianity, the biblical foundation, Moses fasted 40 days on Mount Sinai while receiving the 10 Commandments. Okay, so this is in the Bible. We're now in Judaism still because Moses was sent to the Jews. So he fasted 40 days and then before receiving the 10 Commandments. Okay, fasted in times of grief, repentance, and prayer for others. And again, Jesus fasts 40 days in the wilderness before his public ministry began. It's very interesting in Christianity, right? And let me tell you something interesting. Do you know that the Christian fasting, which is 40 days, has started the same time of Islamic fasting this year? So the Western media has been talking about how the Christians are sort of, in a celebration manner, are saying that Ramadan, the first day of Ramadan, and the first day of Lent, which is their fasting calendar, are on the same day this year. Okay, so we've started fasting the same time, but they're gonna end their fasting the 2nd of April. It's gonna be 40 days, and they celebrate Jesus in the wilderness. So Jesus went to the desert, and then when these 40 days are finished, he was tempted by Satan. He was fasting, difficult time, and then God told him to go and become a public prophet, preach oneness of God, not the Trinity, but the oneness of God. So it's very interesting that Jesus did that. And even you can say that in many prophets, the 40 days is very interesting. Pythagoras, the ancient philosopher, also fasted 40 days in Egypt. Moses, 40 days. Jesus, 40 days. So the number 40 is very interesting. Yes. Okay. So yeah, Jesus fasted. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So in Christianity, we have these, we say denominations, okay? We have these branches, like we have Sunni and Shia. In Christianity, we have these denominations. We have the Catholic, the Orthodox, the Protestant, the Lutherans, that is close to the Protestants, evangelicals. But these are 3 main branches of Christianity. So in Catholicism, which have the Pope, right? You might have heard of the Pope of Vatican. So they fast on Ash Wednesday. This Wednesday was Ash Wednesday. And it is based on a lunar calendar. We're going to talk about the importance of the lunar calendar as opposed to the solar calendar. So Good Fridays abstain from meat on Fridays, but they are allowed to drink. Interesting. One of the differences is in Christianity, they're allowed to drink, but for us, we're not allowed to drink. Okay. And in the Orthodox, which is like the most serious of the Christians, fasting period is roughly half a year. They're in this fasting tradition. And then the Protestant is interesting. You might have heard of the Reformation, like the religious reform, like the Christianity reformed itself, renewed itself, right? And actually, it brought lots of tragedies to the Christian religion. The Protestant made it into a personal conviction. That is where the problem started. So they said, you Christians, you can fast or you cannot fast. It's your choice. And that's why sometimes we call Christianity as a body without bones. Imagine our bodies without a bone. It's gonna be, it doesn't have any shape. One day it is on this path, the other day on different path. You see. So one of the biggest blow to Christianity was the Protestant Reformation. They had good intentions, but they made it very easy. You know. Okay. Let's get into my favorite philosopher in Christianity. Fyodor Dostoevsky was born in 1821, died 1881. So in his magnum opus, in his masterpiece, The Brothers Karamazov, he has this interesting passage. So let me read it for you, okay? So please pay good attention. You may be distracted, but please bring yourself back if you are. The monastic means the serious way, okay? The monastic way is very different. Obedience, fasting, and prayer are laughed at. He says, the Western world is going through a trajectory of godlessness, of a loss of the sacred, of the loss of the transcendence. He says, people are laughing at obedience, obeying to God. Like, why are you obeying to God? You have to be free and individualistic, this freedom, this false freedom. He says, people are laughing at these, yet only through them, through what? Through obedience, fasting, and prayer lies the way to real, true freedom. I cut off, he says, my superfluous means unnecessary desires, and I subdue my proud and wanton will. So when the will is going to be proud, it's very problematic. Let me tell you, sometimes atheism, the whole idea of rejecting God, comes from this will that says, I am the truth. My mind is the truth. This is a very dangerous will. This was the will of Satan. He says, I chastise it with obedience, means I rebuke it, reprimand it, criticize it with obedience to God. And with God's help, I attain freedom of spirit, and with it, spiritual joy. So there must be an aspect of joy in our fasting, in our prayers, in our faith. And he wrote this passage in, I think, pages 300 or 400, I don't remember. I think the ones who are in my Karamazov Brother book club, they know Ms. Kijan and Mr. Bra once attended Ms. Darmin. So basically, the above passage, the preceding passage, is about how the modern world, the world that we're living right now, the Western world in specific, they say true freedom lies in multiplying your desires, creating unnecessary desires, and calling that freedom. But Dostoevsky says that is actually enslavement, that is slavery. So the whole idea of being free and do whatever you want, and temptation being normal, because let me tell you, many people in the West are now increasingly believing that temptation or sin is something normal in human experience. We should not resist it. And the whole definition of taqwa is what? Self-restraint, right? Temptation is not something just saying that it's normal, right? It's not normal. We have to fight it off. And this idea of taqwa is something that is going to be present in the Native American religions as well. Okay, we're going to look at that. Even in Hinduism and Buddhism, we're going to get there, okay? They have this idea of staying close to God through fasting. We'll get there. Okay? So he was like a prescient guy. He saw the future. Okay, let's move on to yet another of my favorite Christian scholars. His name is Saint Thomas Aquinas. Saint Thomas Aquinas wrote thousands of pages about God's existence. He tried to prove that God exists, and he borrowed a lot from Islamic scholars, okay? He borrowed from Imam Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, right? He referenced them a lot. So he's one of the closest scholars to the Muslims, right? So this guy lived in around 800 years ago. And he said there are threefold rational purpose of fasting. He says fasting is to bridle the lust of the flesh, the demand of the body, of the flesh, of the skin, so to speak. Fasting is the guardian of chastity, the protector of cleanliness, chastity. For lust is cooled by abstinence in meat and drink. So he says when we are abstaining from ourselves from drinking even and eating meat, he says one of the most powerful urges of human beings, which is lust, is going to be very cooled down and very weakened. So breaking the desire. And then he says to elevate the mind to contemplation. So when we're fasting, we should contemplate. Fikr, right? Fikr is very important. Dhikr and fikr. Dhikr is remembrance. Fikr is thinking. Remembrance is something already there, but fikr is something we have to do in Ramadan as well. We have recourse to fasting in order that the mind may arise more freely to the contemplation of heavenly things, to the spiritual realities. In fasting is a great opportunity to think of the truth. And he says the third purpose of fasting is to satisfy for sins, citing, this is a verse from the Bible, be converted to me, means to God, with all your heart in fasting and weeping. So this is the biblical understanding. When they fast, this is a conversion to God. That is how they show obedience to God, in fasting and weeping. Okay? Yes, that's Thomas Aquinas. Then we go to Augustine of Hippo. This guy was born around 200 years before the birth of Prophet Muhammad. Okay? So we're not talking about Christianity when it was completely changed. I think this guy still had retained the truth of Ahl al-Kitab. Okay? Because Ahl al-Kitab are not in the true form. They're not against us, right? They're just we're just a continuation of what came before us, right? So Augustine of Hippo, if you have not heard of him, this guy is going to be transformative. He's written a lot about the soul in his book, The City of God and Confessions. Okay, so I'll recommend you to go and either listen to their audiobooks or to actually read the book. It's going to be a life transforming book. So he says, fasting cleanses the soul, raises the mind, subjects one's flesh to the spirit. It's very beautiful. So all the bodily desires, they're not going to be destroyed. They're going to be subject to the spirit. So you can have control of saying no to them. The temptation of, as I say, the seven deadly. So we're going to subject that to our spirit, to our soul, renders the heart contrite and humble, scatters the clouds of concupiscence. Concupiscence means sexual urges, quenches the fire of lust. So it's going to end the fire of lust, kindles the true life of chastity. So again, chastity and modesty are virtues that Prophet Muhammad emphasized a lot. Don't you remember? So it's a very, very beautiful experience as to how other people have thought of fasting as well. So this is Christianity. Let's go to Judaism. Hopefully you're bearing. Just a second. Got it. Okay. Judaism. The only fast directly rooted in the Torah. So in Leviticus, this chapter 16, verse 29 says, in the seventh month, on the 10th day, you shall afflict your souls. And later interpretations meant the wording of afflicting your soul as fasting. Okay? So it is a full 25-hour fasting on Yom Kippur. You might have heard of this. This is the day whereby the Jews are fasting for 25 hours. Okay? There's not going to be any water. There's not going to be any food. Okay? Just like Islam. And the body is afflicted. So we're going to hurt our nafs a little bit. And Maimonides, one of the greatest philosophers in Judaism, like Judaism has been there for at least 4,000 years, okay? He says, the fast must awaken the heart. Without inward turning, the fast is meaningless. Yes, if just our physical organs are fasting, this is a meaningless fast. They have also talked about it. And during the 25 hours, do you know what are the things that are prohibited for them to do? One is bathing, taking shower, sexual relations, eating, drinking, and they are wearing leather shoes, okay? For spiritual significance. So far, so good? Are you attentive?
Teacher, I have a question. Like,
Yes?
it is permissible for like fasting 25 hours because I think it like maybe like hurt your body. I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes actually I do that. When I break my fast, like right now, like maybe an hour later, I'm not gonna eat until the other evening sometimes. So 24 hours, I'm not gonna eat anything, but only water. Okay, but for them, 25 hours, because Judaism they had stricter laws. Okay, Prophet Muhammad came with a easier set of laws. So in Judaism they actually fast that, but I think it's optional. Not everyone is doing that as strictly as ours, but there are some people who can do that. I think many people have done it, and they've been doing it for thousands of years.
Okay, okay.
Let's get into Hinduism. So Hinduism has been standing for around 4,000 to 5,000 years, and we normally think of Hinduism as multiple gods, right? Like having hundreds of gods. But interestingly, Hinduism have this idea of one true supreme God, and all the other gods that they have. Some of the Hindu scholars say that they are agents or attributes of God. They have the God of provision, the God of fertility, right? For us, the God of fertility is not a different God. It's just an aspect of our God, right? The God of razaq. right? So the different gods that they have, some scholars say they are the different attributes of the one God that is there. Okay, the Vishnu, the ultimate God. So ultimately, fundamentally, I would say Hinduism is a monotheistic religion, and God say in the beginning of the Quran that fasting was prescribed for all the other nations, and Hinduism they have a very interesting fast. And let's get into the etymology. Remember, etymology is very important. So the Sanskrit term for fasting is apavasa. Apavasa means up means near, vasa means to stay. And they have understood it as fasting as an experience to stay near to God. Okay? Isn't it very similar to the taqwa we're talking about? That's God consciousness, being conscious of God and being aware of God. Okay? And fasting gradation range from the most austere, so some form of fasting in Hinduism, there's no food, no water, just like Islam and Judaism. Okay, and they have some fasting that is only water is allowed, and then they have a milk only fasting. Okay, they have these different forms. So the devotees formal sankalpa vow before the fast. So they say, just like our niyan intention, they say, "Oh Lord, today I shall observe the fast without taking any water." So they still have this intention, right? Always fasting in the previous nations was not just like there was no food, therefore I'm going to fast. Some atheist people say that the reason that people fasted is because there was no food. No, it's not true. There were actually food, but they intentionally stopped fasting for the sake of God, in order to stay close to God, as the word apavasa mean in Hinduism, that is fasting. Okay, so here's like a verse from their book. O son of Pratha, sacrifice, austerity, charity, or any other act performed without faith are called asat, means unreal. So such activities give no result either in this world or the other world. Isn't like this in Islam, like the acts that we're doing, charity, austerity, fasting. If you don't have this faith in God, like doing it for the sake of God, then it is for us. It is what? It's going to be melted in the hereafter, melted in front of our eyes, like vaporized into the air. And they say it is an asad, means it is useless, unreal. Another striking similarity with Islam as well. So yeah, this was in Hinduism, and Hinduism has been there for thousands of years. And then Buddha was like in the Hindu tradition, and you might have heard of Buddhism as well. So there are interesting things. Let's go through it together. Fasting in Buddhism is generally known as apavasasa, okay, which involves voluntarily abstaining from solid food from noon, like from the noon time, from 12, until the following sunrise. Just a second, everyone, please. Let me see if anybody's messaged me. Everything going fine? Okay, so voluntarily, intentionally, you're going to abstain from solid food from the noon until the following sunrise. So imagine from 12 o'clock until the following sunrise, okay? Often observed on lunar days. So interestingly, all of these different religions are following the lunar calendar. Why lunar calendar? Lunar calendar is something that connects us back to nature because the lunar calendar is cyclical, it is revolving, it connects us back to nature. Okay, it is not like the solar calendar, fixed, rational, strict, linear. Okay, the lunar calendar is more flexible. It is more akin to the actual experience of life. So that's why all the different fasting systems, almost 90% of them, have been based on the lunar calendar. Okay, so the etymology of it is again, apa means near, to dwell, to stay, or to live. Okay, vasa means close, to live or to stay close. Again, they said to the divine. You see that in Buddhism, again, fasting literally means to stay, just like Hinduism, to stay close to God. Isn't it the most striking similarity with the Islamic word of taqwa, God awareness, feeling presence of God? I mean, if fasting doesn't get you to feel the presence of God, to restrain yourself as a result of that, then the fasting is nullified. Okay. Fasting for lay people typically means following the 8 precepts. So interestingly, for hundreds of millions of people in Buddhism, the lay people, the normal people, they have to follow eight rules, precepts, they say. Precepts means rules. during their fasting hours. So if I remember, they shall not kill anything, even a mosquito, a bee, a bug. They should not kill it. They should not steal. They should not, again, engage in sexual intercourse. They should not wear perfume, interestingly. Okay? And they should not sleep in comfortable places. Anything that's comfortable to sleep on, they should not sleep during the time of fasting. And they should not show performance. They should not watch performances, dances, shows, right? So this social media detox is present there as well. And they should not drink as well, drink intoxicants, right? Alcohol and drugs and things. So they have to observe all of that. It tells us fasting is not only something physical for the, just like the modern medicine telling us, oh, fasting is good for the body. Okay, it's one part of it, but that's not why we're doing it, right? We're doing it for a way nobler reason, way higher purpose. And then what do we have? So Buddha's actual name is Siddhartha Gautama. So he spent 6 years in extreme fasting until one day a lady comes and because he's about to die, he's fasted so strictly that she's going to give him milk, and then the enlightenment starts. So he's going to be enlightened and illuminated. Okay, so it came after the moment of fasting, and yeah, that is pretty much in Buddhism. They have it. It is lunar calendar, and they have to follow 8 rules, and they should only drink, I guess, just like Christianity. Okay, they're not allowed to do other things as well. So, okay, let's move on to ancient Egyptian. We're almost there, and then we're going to open for the Q&A. Okay, uh, look at the picture and imagine yourself back to over 3,000 years ago, ancient Egyptians. Everyone, so far so good? Says my internet is a little bit unsecure. Is it good? My voice for everyone?
It is good, teacher. Everything is good.
Because I just want to make sure if somebody is missing out on it, I'm not saying this. So all the other members, is this good for you too?
Yes, everything is fine, hocam.
Okay. So ancient Egyptians, and here's the reason why I chose this cross-comparative religious experience of fasting is to show you the truth of the verse in the beginning, right? God says, I've prescribed it over the previous nations as well. And there's hardly any culture that is without fasting. Almost every culture, from east to west, from Mexico, all the Aboriginals, the indigenous people, they have had the experience of fasting, and almost all they had this intention of their consciousness lifted to a higher state. Okay, so it's very, very interesting to me. All right, fasting was embedded in Egyptian religious life for over 3,000 years. And there's this historian, this Greek historian, Herodotus, 500 years before the coming of Jesus, said the Egyptians fasted before they sacrificed. So yes, they had the fasting ritual, and also required. So what did they have to do? Abstinence from meat. They shouldn't eat meat, fish, wine, onions, and sexual relations. Okay. Fasting understood as preparation for direct encounter with the goddess. It's very interesting. You will encounter and expose yourself to the divine. Spiritual rationale. The body had to be emptied, as Ms. Javidas also said it, this emptiness of ordinary life before it could receive divine presence. Okay, initiates underwent 10 days of fasting, so they had this 10-day fasting initiation. Ancient Egyptian sources describe fasting as a tool for prophetic dreams. So they would have divine visions. That's why they would go 10 days of strict fasting so that they would have some sort of vision, right? We have chila, I don't know, chila, right? Have you heard of this? Like 40 days, you're going to go from away from physical provisions, just a little bit maybe of food for the 40 days. Have you heard of that, the chila? Chilla?
Is it something like inziva?
It's like arba'in,
Like
kriklik. Have you heard of
you're
kriklik?
just praying, eating just small amount of food, and
Yes,
you're just
yes,
worshiping gods.
yes,
So
yes,
we
yeah.
call inziva usually.
Yeah. That is exactly that. And many scholars from different traditions have done that. The 40 days are interesting, but basically to get this vision, be purified of themselves. And even Prophet Muhammad, I think similarly in the cave, he'd had this vision. I mean, the revelation came to him when he was abstaining, right? And it is true for ourselves. Maybe the revelation, not of actual revelation, but inspiration. Inspiration didn't stop. Revelation stopped, yes. But inspiration of divine wisdom is going to continue until the end of time. And anybody who can purify themselves and empty themselves, then God is going to shine through. And I didn't talk about Molana Rumi. Molana Rumi says fasting is like a lute. Do you know the lute instrument? Lute? Do you know? Let me show you. This is the lute instrument. Lute instrument. Okay, look at that. So this is the lute instrument. So it says human beings are like the lute instrument. There should be a cavity. There should be an emptiness within in order for sounds to be made, right? If this lute structure is not empty, then you cannot make a single sound. Okay? So Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi is using this analogy. It says when you're fasting, you're going to be emptied of yourself, and then God is going to write and inscribe his divine musical inscriptions. Okay? Very beautiful, powerful metaphor. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So that was the lute. Yeah, what else is there to say? Yeah, we're done with Buddhism, ancient Egyptians, and some festival. Interestingly, guys, some festivals required entire community participating. So it was not only for, for just some individuals staying in the monasteries on the top of a mountain. No, actually, the entire community, much like Islam, had to participate as a communal act, and then they had the breaking ritual. And as we said in the beginning, Ibn Arabi, as he said it, every aspect of fasting is interesting and it has metaphysical significance. The iftar, the suhoor, the breaking, the fasting itself, they all have meaningful metaphysical resonances or reverberations. Let's go to ancient, I should have written ancient indigenous people, okay? These are the Native Americans. I looked into it, and that is very interesting. Okay, so the Native Americans, there are record of human footprints in Mexico, 23,000 years ago. Okay, human beings, Bani Adam, have lived there. So we normally think, oh, fasting is just 3,000, maybe. It was way older. So pre-European contact, before the Europeans in 1400, okay, before they went to the American Mexico and Alaska, before the Europeans went there were about 18 million Native Americans. 18 million. And fasting appears to have been nearly universal across pre-contact Native American cultures. So there are around hundreds of tribes, or 500 tribes, in the California, in Ottawa. There used to be Native Americans living there, now the Europeans, okay? In Alaska, in Mexico, in Greenland, right? And all of them, I looked into it, actually, I double checked it. Fasting has been across all of them, okay? And found in virtually every tribal tradition from the Arctic to the Southwest, okay? From the north to the Southwest of the indigenous Native Americans, not primarily a dietary practice, so they just didn't do it so that their physical body is healthy. No, fasting was inseparable, you cannot separate it, from prayer, ceremony, and relationship with the spirit world. And they call the spirit world Wakan Tanka, the great spirit. Interesting. They said there's one great spirit, that we fast to this one great spirit. Okay? And they would go through this vision quest. They would have this spiritual vision. Just in Islam, we have this malakut, okay, the spiritual world. Through fasting, we can behold and witness the malakut of God, okay, that is under God's hand. The seeker goes alone to an isolated hill or sacred site for 1 to 4 days. Brings only a blanket and a ceremonial pipe, no food, no water. Even no food and no water also was present in ancient Native Americans, not Egyptians, ancient Native Americans. And interestingly, sometimes their women would fast for the sake of their husband. Okay, I've heard of this as well. So they would pray for their husbands and that. Yeah, if feminism was there that back in the day, yeah, they would have gone mad. Okay. Okay, and before we finish, I just want to say that the ancient Canaanites, okay, the ancient Canaan also had fasting. So from east to south, Fasting has been woven into the fabric of every single nation, woven into the fabric of every single nation. And the sole reason, the main reason was always related to God, to the divine. Thank you so much for listening. I think I've talked a lot, and it's your time to ask questions or share your comments and thoughts.
Thank you so much, teacher. That was really good. Now we know almost about all religions and rules about fasting, and that was so good. Thank you so much for your
Yeah, definitely. My pleasure. Pleasure. Any questions you guys want to ask before we move on?
Hojam, may I ask a question out of
Definitely.
context? It's not really out of, but I just wonder about it. Now we are following up to, during the Ramadan, they told us that we have to follow up the Saudi Arabia. Some said we have to follow up the scientific, the results. So for the prayer, for example, in here, the country that I'm staying, we start to fasting on Wednesday, but some of the people start to fasting on Thursday.
Yeah, we did
So
it for
this
Thursday.
one cause a little bit conflict between some of the people that I know, because some said that we have to follow up to Saudi Arabia. The other said that nowadays we can't follow up to just by the seeing something the other or by one person's idea. So we have to follow up the scientific results. So which one is really suitable? I'm not saying both of them is right,
Yeah.
but which one is the suitable one that we should follow, or if
Yeah.
they need explanation, how should we do the explanation to them? Because there is a lot of different religion in here.
Yeah.
Just 97% of it is Christian, the rest is Muslims and local religion, etc. So there are some misunderstanding about this belief. And Christian told us that we were like Orthodox Catholics and something like this. So I tried to mention the Christian explain it, but I want you to clarify about that one, so it will be
Yeah.
easier for me to explain
Yeah.
about the platform.
So basically, I would say, why should we follow what the Saudi Arabia are saying? Just let me say something interesting before I just address a little bit. So there's this guy in the United States. He says, if you don't follow the Jews, then God is going to curse you. Therefore, we have to support the Zionist regime. Okay? And people are saying, okay, it's in the Bible, but it doesn't say this Jews right now here, right? They're not talking about Netanyahu, right? So Saudi Arabia, when we think about it, it has symbolic significance, not because of the Al Saud, okay? Because they're like best friends of Israel and Trump, right? So because of the Mecca and Medina. So we have no reason to follow Saudi Arabia, but we have reason to actually, just like in the previous nations, look at the moon. And because it is unstable, we don't know until we actually see it. And imagine you don't see it, and Saudi Arabia said, we have seen it, because sometimes it has been politicized, right? Saudi Arabia initially wants to choose a date that is different than the Shias. So there are many political reasons behind it. So I think the soundest one is to follow what the previous generations have been following. They have not been following Saudi Arabia. Okay? So you can follow just whether or not there are people in the city or in the country that are Muslims. They should look at the moon, and once they see the moon, okay, the first day, and then that tomorrow is going to be the fasting day, and whoever has followed that, I think, is more true.
Oh, okay, that's totally fine. But some people said that, for example, when you go to Kaaba or somewhere to pray, worship Allah, you follow all the rules of Saudi Arabia. But why it comes to fasting, you're following up something different.
No, we
So
don't
there's
follow
a
it.
little bit.
Yeah, but who's following the Saudi Arabia rules? We're following Prophet Muhammad's rules, not the Saudi Arabia rules, right?
That's true, but
Yeah,
yeah.
no. I mean, in my country, in this country, they follow the moon. They didn't follow the Saudi Arabia, and this is actually true. Every scholar in a country, they have to themselves look at the moon, because it's different from one country to the country, and then so they see the moon, the people of this region, they have to start fasting, and ultimately the aims of fasting we've been talking about. That is the aim is to get there. Otherwise, Prophet Muhammad says God doesn't want you to go hungry. So we have to remember
Oh,
the
okay.
main aim.
But here, for example,
Go
the
ahead. Go ahead.
government is following up to Saudi Arabia,
Yeah,
but
puppet. We
the
say
some
puppet.
sheikh and imams, they follow up different things, and they are saying
Yeah,
different, different kind of
yeah,
Islamic beliefs are in here. It's
yeah,
very, very different, like
yeah,
close to Christianity, but not really
yeah. I see.
Christianity. That's
I see.
interesting.
Uh,
But
I
what
mean,
if the country, the government said that following up? Should we follow the government or
I
our
see, I
own
see.
country?
Yeah, good question. I think in order not to create a civil disunity, because unity is very important, then you don't want to cause a war and people just going against each other. I think if the government says this, we may not agree with following what the Saudis are saying because the Saudis are selling the cloth of Kaaba to Epstein. Okay, so we have to remember this. But yeah, so we shouldn't create disunity, and to preserve that, we're going to follow what the government has said, although we have criticisms. Okay, so it's very important to follow the government. Otherwise, people are going to have different Eids, right? Imagine the children of one cousin living in a city and the children of another cousin. They're not going to have Eid on the same day, and they're going to be sad. So I think we should remain the unity. And while being suspicious of following Saudi Arabia for every step. I don't think we have to.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thanks so
Definitely,
much.
definitely, definitely. My pleasure. Yeah, definitely. Anybody, if you want to go, please take your time. Thank you so much for your presence, and I hope it was beneficial somehow. And yeah, so if anybody wants to ask questions or make comments, feel free to do so. If not, feel free. You may want to go. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much again, teacher.
Definitely, miss.
Have a great time.
Have a great time,
Welcome.
everybody. So thank you for your presence.
Thank you too, Mr. Ahmed.
Definitely, my
good time.
pleasure. Have a good time, sir. Goodbye.
Have a
Definitely,
great time,
Mr.
Mr. Ahmed. Thank you so much for
Thank you so
having
much.
us for this
Definitely,
profound community and session.
definitely. My pleasure, sir. My pleasure.
Have a
Hope it
great
was
day.
beneficial. Have a great day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Definitely. All of this.